Hey everybody, so hopefully by now you think you know everything you need to know about market equilibrium and demand and supply, but when it comes to Achievement Standard 3.1, they want some very specific usage of language in terms of the way it's explained. It's pretty pedantic, but once you get the gist, it's pretty easy. So here we go. Market equilibrium, the basics. You should know the basics of the idea of surplus and shortage. If there's one or the other, the market forces will slowly move the market to equilibrium, where the quantity demanded equals the quantity supplied. Important to all this is making sure you understand actually what a demand curve and a supply curve represent. Every point on a curve represents the quantity or amount demanded or supplied at a particular price. So you find a price, that's the amount demanded. Find the same price, that's the amount supplied. It's not one continuous kind of line in actuality. It's a whole series of points plotting price against the amount demanded and price against the amount supplied. So as it says there in the example, demand curve might show at $3. Students would buy 300 nachos from the canteen if we had one that was still operating. But at $2, they'll buy 350. Each point is a different combination of price and quantity. You'll see why that's important in a minute. So how does the market move to market equilibrium? In the past, we'll just say, hey, there's been an increase in demand, so the price will increase to whatever, $3.50, and the quantity will increase to 400. Ta-da, done. That's insufficient for level 3. What we need to talk about is how market forces, also known as the invisible hand of the market, will move the market to the equilibrium from the old one. So when something changes in the market, consumers and producers act on their own in a way that shifts the market price and quantity without anyone telling them to, which is why it's called the invisible hand. When you hear the term market forces, it just means demand and supply, consumers and producers. So here we go. Suppose there was an increase in supply in the market for internet providers due to increased competition. Okay, pretty straightforward. We've got our supply curve. It would be really easy just to say that the price will fall and market quantity will increase, but that's not enough. What we need to start off with, and you've got to remember, there might be an increase in supply, but nobody actually knows that has happened. Nobody is out there saying, oh, look, there's an increase in supply, we should drop our prices. Not obviously. So in reality, the price might initially stick at price PE, the original price. But what happens then? If you go across at price PE, let's go across here. If you go across at price PE, the quantity supplied now shifts to QS at price PE. Now the people buying it, the demand, stays at QE, or that becomes the quantity demanded. So we now end up with a surplus because of that increase in supply at the original price. Okay, so that's the key thing. So whenever we're doing this analysis, we say at the original price. If it doesn't change, this is the situation that's going to occur. So we have a surplus. Businesses recognize there's a surplus and they've got too much stock. Now, I don't know how too much stock works in the internet provider world, but I guess they need more customers. So what are they going to do? They're going to start cutting their prices to reduce that surplus or that excess supply. So as they reduce prices, they will also reduce the quantity supplied a bit, but consumers will increase the quantity demanded, and that will keep happening until the equilibrium price is reached. Quantity supplied equals quantity demanded. Ta-da! So that's the key bit of analysis. Producers will choose to lower their prices to clear the surplus to sell off whatever extra they've got. Consumers will respond by increasing the quantity demanded. Producers will respond by decreasing the quantity supplied until we get to equilibrium. So that's what you need to talk about, all those things. So let's look at another example. Really common, this is almost an NCEA type question. Explain how market forces would move the equilibrium in a market if there was an increase in demand. So here we go. You start off by saying, well, if the price did not change, so if it stayed at PE, then there's actually a mistake in that graph. Hopefully you've spotted it with the price arrow going the wrong way. So at price PE, if there was an increase in demand, quantity demanded would increase to QD. didn't mean to do that, increased QD, the amount supplied would stay at QE because from the producer's point of view, there's no incentive to increase supply. So this is a pretty realistic example, right? More people want the product. Producers haven't realized that yet, and so they don't change the amount that they supply. So what happens? Consumers will bid up, we use the term bid up the price. Can be consumers out there willing to offer to pay more. Producers will recognize that their stock is selling out very quickly, but particularly consumers will choose to bid up the price, offer higher prices. That will cause the quantity demanded to decrease as the prices rise. Some people will drop out of the market, but it will encourage producers to supply more. And so the quantity supplied will increase until we get to the point where demand and supply are equal at Q1, P1. Okay, so be careful with the language. This is an increase in demand from D to D1. So that's anytime you talk about an increase in demand or a change in supply, that implies a change in the curve. If we just move along the curves because of a change in price, that's in this case an increase in the quantity supplied and a decrease in the quantity demanded. So be careful with your language that you're using. So this is what we've got, everything I've just said really. You can read that in your own time, feel free to pause it, but consumers bid up the price, prices start to rise, producers increase quantity supplied, consumers reduce quantity demanded until quantity demand equals quantity supplied at the new equilibrium price. Did I have a merit? Okay, not worth an excellence, but definitely worth a merit if you can trot all that out. So very formulaic, and it doesn't matter what's happening. So long as there's no government interference, the market will return to equilibrium. So key points for explaining the change in market equilibrium. Usually you shift the curve, find the new price and quantity, and then in your explanation, point 2, you start off by saying, if the price did not change, is there going to be a surplus or a shortage? Okay. If the price did not change, what's then going to happen for producers or consumers in response? It's pretty simple. If there's a surplus, producers will choose to drop their prices. If there's a shortage, consumers will choose to bid up the price. Okay, that will result in a change in quantity supplied and quantity demanded. What will happen? And the end result's always the same, a new equilibrium price and quantity. So it's pretty formulaic. That's how you explain how market forces return the market to market equilibrium. One other thing I would add, so long as the market is at equilibrium, it is always allocatively efficient. Okay, the amount of consumer surplus and producer surplus might change. If its total consumer and producer surplus is increased, we might call that an increase in net social welfare or an increase in consumer and producer surplus. But even if consumer and producer surplus is decreased, if the market is still at equilibrium, it is still allocatively efficient. But the total amount of social welfare might have decreased because consumer and producer surplus is decreased. Just throwing that in there. Anyway, hope that helps.